俺の財宝か？欲しけりゃくれてやる。探せ！この世のすべてをそこに置いてきた。
Yo guys, and welcome to this new video. There are only a few days left before the Fire Festival, and so the major battles of the arc begin. And even if there are some pieces that still need to find their place, like for example Big Mom's role in everything that will happen from this point on, and Jinbe's and Nekomamushi's arrival, at the same time I think we already have enough information to try to understand how the second round between Luffy and Kaido will go, especially considering the new power-up the Mugiwara is going to achieve, and that seems focused on the development of his armament haki. But before seeing all of that in detail, let me say I publish new videos every week, so make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to always know when I upload something new. Alright, with that said, let's jump straight into it. So, as I mentioned, we have only a few days remaining before the Fire Festival, and in this short period, Luffy seems to have the possibility to only learn as power-up the advanced armament haki. This will of course give him a boost in his offensive power, which for what we saw in his first round versus Kaido is clearly what Mugiwara could not avoid to achieve in order to have a chance versus the Yonko. Indeed, the most relevant aspect of that fight, in my opinion, is not that the Emperor one-shotted Luffy. I mean, that is important and we will talk about it later, but mainly the fact he could withstand Luffy's most offensively powerful form, at least for what we saw so far, without a single scratch. And not only he didn't even use the visible version of armament haki, so the hardened coated one, but he didn't even use his devil fruit, which I think we can be fairly confident assuming would have given him a further defensive boost thanks to the dragon's scales. And so, since you cannot beat an opponent you can't damage, of course Luffy needed a boost in his offensive potential. And this is what the mastering of Flowing Sakura, as the advanced armament haki is called in Wano, is supposed to allow him to achieve. Moreover, we can expect that improving Busoshoku will also allow him to improve the way he utilizes it defensively. However, even if I can't see how the increased offensive power could allow Mugiwara to damage the Yonko, I don't think the associated defensive boost will be enough to withstand Kaido's destructively overwhelming attacks. Indeed, just like the Emperor did to defend from the Gear 4th, to one-shot the Boundman, which by itself has a quite nice defensive structure, since the inflated rubber muscles coated with hardened haki become incredibly resistant air cushions, Kaido only needed to use his armament haki coated club in his human form. Now, I know someone tried to explain this happening with the club being made, at least in part, by Kairoseki. A fact that, in my opinion, would contrast how Oda seems to want to characterize Kaido and also the expectations he created around the strongest being in the world. I don't think it matters anyway. Because even if that was the case, we know that what System does is draining the energy of Devil Fruit users who remain in contact with the system itself. And in Luffy's case, without even changing the fact his body is made of rubber. So it's difficult to imagine any sort of Kairoseki influence in the incredibly fast way Kaido hit Luffy with his Thunder God attack. Instead, what is important is that he didn't transform. Indeed, zone abilities, as we know, allow the user to increase a lot his physical capabilities. an aspect that is most likely maximized in Kaido's case since his animal is a dragon. Furthermore, we can assume in his hybrid form the Yonko will also acquire the mythological abilities associated to the dragon itself, like for example flying or breathing fire, which will give him increased mobility, range and firepower. Moreover, especially considering how both Doflamingo and Katakuri, the two major opponents Luffy fought in the New World, used the awakened versions of their Devil Fruit powers, I think we can be sure the Emperor will too. And since for Zone, awakening means a further boost in physical capabilities, durability and recovery rate, Kaido at his max potential seems to me a beast. Luffy, even with all his willpower and stamina, and even after his advanced armament haki power-up, will very difficultly have a chance to defeat. If so, this in my opinion only leaves two possibilities. The first is the Gear 5th, but even if Luffy indeed already has it in store, the fact he didn't use it against Katakuri, where he was clearly in a great disadvantage, means that it must have massive drawbacks, and it must be something to use only once and only to conclude the fight, no matter if it is effective or not, because after there's no possibility to continue the same fight. However, the very fact he didn't use it where he was overwhelmed suggests that he might not have a Gear 5th yet, which makes much more likely the second possibility, which is that Luffy won't face Kaido alone. After all, also in the two battles we mentioned before, Luffy didn't exactly fight alone, because with Doffy there was Law and he was helped by Guts and the Colosseum fighters when he needed to recover his haki, while versus Katakuri his opponent damaged himself kinda badly, and also he only had a chance to win because finding Brûlé gave him the opportunity to recover his haki. And so it won't be surprising to see this same pattern repeating with an even stronger enemy. This idea seems also supported by some elements of the plot, like for example the fact Luffy allied with Law exactly for the purpose of defeating Kaido together, and the fact the Ninja Pirate Mink Samurai Alliance, for what concerns Supernova and Yonko Commander level fighters, apparently has a great numerical advantage on Kaido and Orochi's side. Indeed, while Kinemon counts for now 8 of the 9 Red Scabbards, Luffy, Law, Zoro, Sanji, Jinbe and the probable involvement of Kid and Killer with a total of 15, the Yonko and the Shogun only count 3 calamities: Drake, Hawkins, Apu, Kyoshiro and maybe Fukurokuju, and even counting the apparently very weak Orochi himself, we only have 10 fighters. Now, of course, there's also the variable Big Mom, but considering that with her amnesia she will probably remain on Chopper's and so Luffy's side, while without she won't be on Kaido's, even in the worst case scenario we can expect her to form a sort of third side in this battle without influencing the differences in numbers we talked about a moment ago. By the way, before going on, try to think about the not so unlikely possibility of a 3-way ending fight of this arc with Kaido, Big Mom, and an alliance of supernova made by Luffy, Law, Kid, and maybe even someone among Zoro, Sanji and Jinbe. So because of these different forces, we should expect that at least one of the fights of the Fire Festival will be a handicap match. And since Inuarashi, Nekomamushi, Ashura Doji, and probably also Kawamatsu, not to talk about Jinbe, Sanji and Zoro, seem all strong enough to beat a Calamity one-on-one, it appears not so unlikely that at least one of them will join Luffy and Law against the final opponent. What's more, the fact Luffy might not defeat Kaido alone is suggested also by the very title Oda gave to the chapter where he was destroyed. Indeed, when the author names a chapter Luffy vs someone or someone vs Luffy, that always signs the beginning of the definitive duel between the two, without further rematches. And so we can imagine this will also be Kaido's case. To conclude, everything we said suggests that even if Luffy certainly will acquire his power up, so he will master the flowing Sakura, and so he will be stronger in offense and probably also in defense, Kaido still seems too strong for that to be enough. And for this reason, if we exclude the possibility of a Gear 5th, that in any case would most likely be only a last resort, the only option left, which seems to be supported by some important elements of the plot, is that Mugiwara will fight the Yonko, supported by other characters, with the first choice of course being Law, and maybe even other members of the Straw Hat Pirates. But until Oda shows us this long-awaited final fight, that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching, don't forget to leave a like and make sure to subscribe. See you next time, Janet.